Okay, great. So I love questions. I guess we'll do those at the end. Interactive is fine with me, but we do them at the end as well. I'm John Cogley. I'm the owner of Daniel Smith. I've been with Daniel Smith, oh my God, almost a good portion of my life. Actually, more years than not. 36 years, 37 years. So it's a phenomenal company. I love it. When I joined, it was filled with artists, and we also had manufacturing. Today we have manufacturing, and we still have artists within manufacturing. So it's a wonderful, wonderful company. I love meeting with you as artists and hearing what you have to say and hearing your ideas. I love the energy. When I had my stores, it's the one thing I love more than anything was the energy of the stores. So today I'm going to briefly go over how we make paint, what makes us different. So if we go to the second slide.
Oop, there we go.
So if we looked at this as a clock, kind of, and we go from the bottom where it says create, the most important step to me is you, the customer. Without you, I don't have a company. I love to make stuff. Pretty soon I would run out of money because I would make so much stuff. So thank you so very much for being my customer and being Delta Art's customer. After that, it goes to my staff. Without a good staff, I would not have a company as well. So I value both of you tremendously. Thank you very much. If we go to the top, we have source. That's actually my mineralogist, Bruce Wood. Bruce Wood is a geologist, mineralogist specifically, a subdiscipline. And I've sent Bruce all over the world to meet with miners. These are miners that might have a mine maybe the size of your bedroom, maybe the size of your house. These aren't gold miners or silver miners that go for, gusto, just digging. They're very careful about how they dig because what they're going after, what they really want are mineral specimens that they can sell to museums or collectors. And I buy all the broken pieces because all the broken pieces work for me. So it's a way to utilize as close to 100% as possible of the minerals that are found. If we look next to it, we see that that's a piece of lapis. And in a couple of more pages, I'm going to show you how we deal with that. And then a couple of the machines. One is a machine that we use to process the minerals. The second is our dispersion mill, which I'll go over more. So now if we go on to the third page. Okay, the third page is me. I am started in the IT area. I came in to integrate the computer system. Been there long enough that there wasn't integrated system. There were PCs were very new to the marketplace. There was no web. So it was an interesting time to be with the company. And what it enabled me to do was two things. One, learn every facet of the company because I had to go into every department to learn what they did and how they did it so I could integrate it. And I was able to spend 3 months in the manufacturing area, which I absolutely loved. It's the reason I bought the company. I love the smell of it. I love the sound of it. It was just phenomenal. The picture below it shows the earth in the laboratory. And I'm asked a lot. So what is the difference between a natural pigment and a laboratory or a synthetic? So your quinacridones, your pyrroles, your parylene, those are all synthetic. Even your cobalt. So the cobalt ore is a natural. It is processed in the laboratory to be cobalt pigment. That's not found naturally. So when you want perfection, you go to the laboratory. You can make a lot of things in the laboratory, and they're absolutely perfect. When you want to go to the earth, you're tied back to millennia of other artists that were before you and used those things that were found around where they lived to be able to do beautiful things. So whether it was totem poles or it was the Central American indigenous people that used it and put pigment into animal fat and wore that animal fat on their face, that's been around a long time. In fact, I've been to every continent except Antarctica, and every continent, wherever there's people, there is a internal need to express what they see and how they feel. And whether that is showing animals they hunted or family units that they loved, you find that everywhere. It's part of our human DNA. We want to let other know what's important to us and what you don't find, sometimes maybe a chariot or two. It's way more about people. Just like today, somebody opened your family photo book. they would find pictures of family members, places that you thought were awe-inspiring, not usually cars and trucks and things of that nature, more often things of passion. So we can see some of the very old masters, the ancient peoples. This one is in France. There's others in Australia, Africa. There's always been art. If we go to the next page. So this right here shows you there is a Bruce Wood. So Bruce Wood is my mineralogist. Bruce does not carry a gun, but I wanted to get, the old miner, and that's the only one I could find. If we see the second picture, first picture is mineral lapis. And lapis comes from two places in abundance. So many of the minerals can be found in different places, but they're not abundant. The two abundant places are Chile and Afghanistan. Afghanistan has breathtakingly gorgeous lapis. It's pricey because it can be used in the jewelry trade. Chile has lapis. It can have more quartz in it, and I have to take more time processing that out and more time purifying the Chilean lapis to make it as pure as the Afghan lapis. So Chilean lapis costs me less, but takes me more time. Afghan lapis costs me more money, but takes less time. So in the end, they equal out because as a manufacturer, time is money. The more people I have on a machine, the more overhead goes into it, the higher the cost goes. The next thing it shows is the jaw mill. Jaw mill is a very, very large piece of equipment, probably twice the size of your washing machine. And it has two very large plates. And those plates come together. They squeeze, they don't crush, they squeeze. And when they squeeze, you'll see it in the picture next to it, they fracture or cleave the mineral. The majority of all the minerals are crystals, and crystals are very, very strong, like diamonds are the strongest thing we know of, but they're very weak on their lattices. A diamond can be broke on its lattice. Very hard to break a diamond any other way. That's why they're used to carve streets. They're just unbelievably strong, as most crystals are. So if we see the next picture. So I start with lapis, probably the size of a football, maybe the size of a basketball. I put it into the jaw mill. It comes out maybe 3 times the size of an ice cube. So we look at the next page. Once I get it the size of the ice cube, I put it to what's called a hammer mill. And that's our baby hammer mill. We can use that for very soft material. The bigger hammer mill is about 4 times the size of that. It's huge. And it's huge because to cleave minerals that are even the size of an ice cube takes pressure to cleave it. So we'll put it inside of that. And now when we come out of that machine, it's going to be about the size of a piece of rice. If it's bigger than that, we're going to push it back to the machine again. So what we want is the size of a piece of rice. After that, we're going to put it to a ball mill. And a ball mill is just like your dryer. It tumbles and tumbles and tumbles and tumbles. Inside we have silica. Ours are shaped like almonds. We found if you shape them like balls, if you put 4 or 5 balls together, there's always a void where they touch. Where almonds, the points are so fine, they come together. So we get a better mix. And so from the ball mill, what we're looking at is to get 40 microns or less. And to give you an idea, the size of a piece of paper is about 100 microns. The size of your hair is about 80 to 100 microns. So we're talking about half the size of your hair on the very large size. That's beyond what the human eye can see. It's very, 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 very small. And I'm often asked, so John, how long does it take to make Primitex? This is all for Primitech. These are minerals that we source ourselves and that we turn into pigment. And this process can be 2 weeks. If we have a Sedona or a Yavapai, which is a softer material. And if we have a harder material, a barrel or something similar to that, it can take up to 3 months. And people say, well, you could probably just use a RAM and smash that. Well, absolutely couldn't. And it's wonderful to have engineers in the group because they're such smart people, and they're always thinking about how to do something faster, better. I absolutely love that. It wouldn't work for us. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why it takes so much time. If we take a glass of table sugar and we go out into the sun, and here in Seattle, it's a beautiful day today. It's very sunny outside. And we move that sugar around, you'll see blues and reds and greens. And the reason is the table sugar is like a bunch of little prisms. They have beauty to them. The light reflects or refracts within that matrix. So you see a lot of light out of that. If we took the same cup of sugar, but now it's powdered sugar, confection sugar, and we bring that outside, it's deader than a doornail. So we don't get color from powder. And that's why we don't crush. That's why we cleave. We cleave over and over and over and over and over to make that crystal smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, but still be a crystal. So that's what takes so much time and so much testing. If we now go to the next page, this is how we begin. Can we flip back one more page? Okay, so there's two things we're going to look at, and that is how color can change because of size, and how color can change because of chemistry. So a good example of that is ultramarine and French ultramarine. Ultramarine and French ultramarine are both PB29, and P always stands for pigment. So it's pigment blue number 29. They are exactly the same, exactly. And so then you say to yourself, well, then what's the difference? The difference is the particle size. In French ultramarine, the particle size, make believe it's this big. So we see French ultramarine, it's a big particle. And we see ultramarine, it's a smaller particle, still pigment blue number 29. When the light wave comes down and hits the larger particle, it moves toward the red or the warm. When the light wave comes down and hits the smaller particle, it moves toward the cool or the green. So ultramarine blue is slightly more green, slightly more cool. French ultramarine is slightly more warm, slightly more red. I can't see that with my eyes, but I've met many, many artists, and you might be one of those that can see the difference of the warmth versus the cool. I think that's kind of a beauty of the artistic eye. And that's the difference between ultramarine and French ultramarine. Okay, now if we go to the next page, this is going to be how we make paint. Essentially, Daniel Smith is a color house. What we deal with is we deal with pigment, and we turn that pigment into paint. So we start with a vessel, and for a pot, if you will. And a vessel for us is anything that you can put distilled water, gum arabic, and pigment into. Okay, so I have a full manufacturing facility. And in the manufacturing facility, we can start at anywhere from 2 to 4 ounces, because we're going to constantly test new colors that come in. We always make a test batch of every color, no matter how many years we've made it. Quinacridone gold we've made for 20, 30, 35 years. We would still make a test batch and test the test batch, because that's just what we do. So in the lab, we could do 2 to 4 ounces. On the floor, we could do anywhere from 20 gallons to 300 gallons. So just huge size differentials. We're going to use distilled water, and the reason we use distilled water, there's not other materials in it. We also run our distilled water through UV filters to kill anything that might be even distilled water. We want as close to nothing as you can get. I'm often asked, well, John, you know, I use regular water. I use tap water. As an artist, you can use any water you want. There are things in almost every water, except for distilled and then purified. If you want to get to the same place all the time, you want to reduce your variables, but it's not necessary for you as the artist. My mother would use any type of water. My sister lived on a farm, and they had well water. Here in the city where I live, Newcastle, we have a lot of chlorine in our water, so it varies. It's all up to you. So once we have the vessel, first step we do is going to be the mixing station. And all of our stations have to be released by the floor chemist. We have floor chemist, we have lab chemist, and we have chief R&D chemist. So there's 3 people that are there that are testing things. But the one on the floor, gosh darn it. Sorry about that. I'm going to have to go outside. My system's going crazy. I'll be right back. Oh, man. Okay. Turn this off.
For those of you who don't know, John's system is being worked on in his house, and so he has been navigating that
Okay,
during the
it
call.
stopped. Sorry about that. It stopped.
All good.
It's a machine, so I'm sure it's going to come back. I've got service coming in. Sorry about that. It's beyond my control. It's machine has its own brain, and I don't know why it's doing what it's doing. So I learned as older I get, I come to realize there's really very few things in the world you have control over. So once we're done with the mixing, there's going to be a chemist that's going to have to look at it. He has already looked at the dry pigment, the amount, etc., from the mixing vessel. He's released that to go to the mixing station. The mixing station, that mixer right there that you see, just the shaft is about 6 feet long. It goes up to 18 feet in the air. It's a mammoth machine. It's huge. And so we will mix it to wet out, what's called wetting out all the material. And doing these steps are very similar to if you've ever made a cake. You're going to want to get all the ingredients, or pancakes. You want to get all the ingredients wet. And you want to get rid of any of those little pockets of pigment, just like you try to get rid of flour. So you're going to mix it. And what's going to happen, 2 things are going to happen. It moves so fast that it's going to capture air and it's going to rise. Just like if you were making the pancakes or the cake mix, it's going to rise because you're capturing air in the mixture. So we're going to get rid of that. I'll show you how we get rid of that in a second. Pigment they're very, very small. And because they're very, very small, they have an electrostatic charge. And the electrostatic charge wants to make them cling together. And when they cling together, what you see that in this top picture, there's like a bunch of spheres together. That's called an agglomerate. And that's all the pigment particles amassing to each other. The bad thing about that is when light hits it, you get refraction and not reflection. And when you get refraction, it's the same thing as scattering of light. You don't get purity. You get hot, cold spots, hot spots. It's not a uniform, and therefore it's not at its maximum. And because we want to make sure that the light is being hit uniformly, and therefore having the best light coming to your eyes, we want to make it as linear as possible. And that's what's showing down below. And the way that we do that is we use what's called a dispersion mill. And the dispersion mill allows the gum arabic to go around each particle. The other thing is we use gum arabic, we don't use honey. And the reason we use gum arabic, when we first started going into watercolors, we tested everything. And honey we found was very hydrophilic. It's water loving. It'll try to grab moisture out of the air. It won't make your paints wet, but in humidity, it can make them tacky. You'll not see it transfer to your fingers, but you'll feel the tackiness. And we decided on gum arabic because we want it to dry. In everything we do, we try to make the artist the master of what it is they're using. So when you've used our dot cards, that's pure, that's been dried for weeks or months, and you can easily re-wet gum arabic. So in other words, you get to choose how much water you want to use and when you want to use it. We really like that. So we'll look at the next page. And what this page is showing you is a dispersion mill. The blue machine is called a dispersion mill, and we have 5 of those. And what we use the dispersion mill for is two things. Some people think it's to mix. It's not to mix. It's a dispersion mill or a de-aeration mill. And what it's going to do, as you see in the picture where it says agglomerate, any agglomerate is going to shred it apart because it's going to tear it apart. Over 2 of the rolls are opposing each other. So it just constantly takes the material and tears it apart. Doesn't smash it, doesn't mix it, just tears it apart. And that causes the gum arabic to go around each particle. What it also does, it takes the air out of the mixture that we put in during the mixing process. If I sold you a big fluffy tube of watercolor, you're not getting your money's worth. And so we're taking the air out, so you're getting the most bang for your buck. Very important process. The de-aeration mill or the 3-roll mill takes quite a long time for one pass. And every machine, there's no paint that we have that takes one pass. They all take multiple passes. Some of them can take 6 or 7 passes. It depends on the complexity of the pigment, and it depends on the complexity of the different pigments that might make up a color. For example, moon glow or shadow violet, etc. And just so you know, color staining, light fastness, opacity is all determined by the pigment. So how the chemistry house, whoever it was, made that particular pigment, they also made those characteristics. You can change the characteristics of opacity by how much you use or what you use over the top of it. But the pigment house made it for somebody that had strict requirements of what they wanted to achieve. And for the most part, that's usually industry in general, the car industry in specific, because pigments are very, very expensive to create. The quinacridones cost millions of dollars a piece just to create because they're very, very complex. So let's go to the next picture. And that just shows, you see on the back, the very back part of this on the mill, that big hump in the back, that's the paint being added on. And then it's going to go between those 2 mills. One's being hidden by the paint. Then you see the second one. And then the third one is actually just taking paint off to what we call the apron. There's a big razor blade that runs that whole length, and it's taking the paint off and going into a barrel, and then we're going to test it. So it's a 3-roll mill. One you can't see because the paint is on top of it, and it's being dispersed between the second roll and then fed onto the third roll and then the apron. Okay, so we can go to the next picture. And this is just showing one of the batch makers, and he is putting the paint onto the first roll or the feed roll, the feed roll, to then go through the dispersion between that roll and the next roll. Okay, we'll go to the next one. So we used to use what was called a tube filler. And this machine right here has a computer on it. And inside it has an auger. And we would tell the auger how much to spin to put paint into a tube. And somebody would hold the tube, put it up to the bottom of that little nozzle, push a gas pedal on the floor. The machine would rotate whatever amount it had to rotate to fill the tube. And we stopped using those about probably for watercolor, probably 10, 15 years ago, 16 years ago. And for oil, probably about 10 years ago. Now we use automated machines that can do 6 tubes, that can do 60 tubes a minute. So much faster and much more precise. Even though the machines we use now are extremely precise, we still use a check weight on the back end of them to assure the tubes have the right weight. And then one of the batch makers then even takes that tube and puts it to a scale and make sure it's double checked. So we double check within manufacturing, and then we check an additional time when it comes to our distribution. Because every tube, every box has a weight inside of our system. We know exactly what everything's supposed to weigh. The Primatech paint are those paints that are made from minerals. It's called Primatech because it's primitive or ancient, really more ancient. And then I put technology because today we use technology. Back in the day, it was the strength of the human arm that could take mortar and pestle and really grind those pigments out to make color. And that's why when you look at a lot of the masters, there's hot spots and cold spots. And that's because they couldn't get the particles to be linear. They had more agglomerates, and they were much more refraction. That's why you see a lot of hot spots and cold spots within the master's work, if you ever thought about that. So one thing I'd love to do is go to all art museums all over the world, and have been really fortunate to have been able to go to 90-something countries, and every country has an art museum, which is awesome. Every country, for the most part, has art, which is also very lovely. Sometime, if you want, you can watch this video. And this video shows the whole process of making lapis. You'll see a young gentleman standing next to a blue piece of lapis. He has his hands out. It's probably like 6 feet tall. The piece of lapis, the seam of lapis, is probably 50 feet long and 10 feet high. And that's in Chile. It's just enormous. The things that look like rocks are boulders of lapis the size of Volkswagen Beetles. So it underlies how huge they are. They're absolutely mammoth. And so it can do this short video, which I think is about 3 or 4 minutes. It would take me probably close to 2 months to do. I wish I could do it and have the same quality in 3 or 4 minutes, but making paint is really kind of like being an artist. It's a labor of love. It's not being fast. It's assuring that you have continuity of color. You have all of the systems being constantly checked. You have the same material being used over and over. The one thing I didn't say is when we have lapis, our lapis we process to about 80% purity. I could do 90, I could do 95. At 80, it's roughly $2,000 a kilo. At 90, it would be in the $10,000 to $15,000 a kilo. It's unbelievably expensive. It's a huge amount of material I can't use, and has to be purified for just an extremely long amount of time. And realistically, if you have French ultramarine or ultramarine blue, those are synthetic forms of lapis. Chemically, they're identical. But they're made in the laboratory. They're quite, my favorite color is ultramarine blue. They're just absolutely gorgeously beautiful. If you want to use the same blue intensity that the masters used, you can use the ultramarine or French ultramarine. Our lapis is more of a baby blue, but it's pure lapis. The masters used, and you see there, it's beautiful to see the masters work, and the pure blue of the robes or things of that nature. And you have to remember at that time, lapis was the same price as gold. So really what it's showing, you see those huge flowing robes of blue, etc., is that it was the church, which had huge amounts of money. It was a benefactor that was extremely rich, or it was the government. Those three entities that had so much money, they could do that. So they're showing not only beauty, they're showing I have great wealth. And so glad they could do it because they're just absolutely beautiful to see. But today, if you wanted to do that, you could use a synthetic. When you're using the pure lapis, you're just kind of using kind of what the masters used. If the lapis, that's 80%, was put into a polymer, like acrylic, or it was put into a linseed oil, it would be much darker because you're changing the index of refraction. So gum arabic doesn't do that. When you're seeing a pigment, all of our pigments on your paper, you're seeing the pigment itself. The gum arabic is used as a methodology to hold it to your paper. So nothing comes as close as seeing the pigment as you can see it as you, the watercolorist. Okay, so go to the next page. So on the back of our tubes, you'll see two things. You'll see ASTM and ACMI. The ASTM is a standard for testing, for example, light fastness. And this machine right here, called the xenon photometer, is about the size of a very, very large refrigerator, and has what's called a xenon bulb inside of it. You can see it in the center, right there. In the center is a xenon bulb. And those are about 20 inches high, and they're roughly about $2,500. And with that bulb, I can test roughly 16. Give me just a moment, please. So the xenon photometer is about 24 inches. I can test multiple colors with it. The bulb is going to wear out pretty quickly because it's so hot. So hot that we use distilled water to go down the center of it to cool it down. Otherwise, it would melt. And I can do 100 years in about 16 days. So we test all of our materials with a xenon photometer. Whenever we get material in, we get it comes in large lots. The manufacturing company will send us their test. We will verify their test in this machine, and then we will make a test. That's what all these little things underneath it are. These are all tests of color, pigment. And then we'll put it to a photospectrophotometer to get the light reading. So we first do a swatch. We test it in the photospectrophotometer. We put it to the xenon photometer for X number of days. Then we test the same space again on the swatch to see any fading. And we've tested over and over and over and over. We will also then send it out to the ASTM to have them tested as well. So it's triple tested, manufactured, Daniel Smith, and ASTM. You should look on back of your tubes to see if that standard is being met by whoever you're purchasing from. I know there's at least 2 companies that do it. If light fastness is important to you, and I think if you're going to want your material, your paintings to last, light fastness is almost the #1 thing of importance. Then you should look for that. The other thing for us is on the back, we test everything for toxicology. So we have Duke University, which is tests for the US, and we send it to Duke University to have all of our materials tested. So that's verified on the back of the tube. And then for international, we use REACH, and REACH is the international. And so we use multiple toxicology, and we go by the one that's the most stringent. So if a test here for a pigment is not as stringent as one being tested for reach. Reach wants something even more. We go by the even more. So we go by the test, the most stringent one available, and that's what's on our tube. And I'll tell you that's an ongoing. They're constantly testing. They being the outside laboratories. Okay, if we go to the next page. There's nothing on it.
Hmm.
That's okay. We could pass that one.
Okay.
Okay, so Mohs hardness scale. This is just a scale for hardness. And the hardest thing that we know of is a diamond. And the softest thing is talc. Talc, we can all be supermen or superwomen. We could put it to our hands and we could just crush it like it was nothing. Diamond, nah, good luck with that. That's not going to happen. Corundum, very, very hard as well. It's a 9. Quartz is a 7. Quartz is very tough. We use beryls and corundums that are 7s and 8s. They're very, 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 very tough materials. They absolutely destroy my 3-roll mill. So I pick a 3-roll mill that we're going to destroy. It takes about 2 years with the Primitex to destroy it. And then to have destroy means the rolls no longer have a bevel to them. And so I have to have them replaced, and it's about $60,000 to replace it. And with the Primitex, I have to replace it every 2 years. So it's very expensive making Primitex. It's expensive in the amount of time it takes. It's expensive in the cost of the material, the mineral, and it's expensive in terms of the machinery. So to kind of give an example, a nail is a 6 or a 7, which is hard, but not as hard as many of the minerals that we use. Underneath it, you see what's called granulation. So granulation, reticulation, or flocculation are all a process that happens when you have differential specific gravity, i.e. something weighs more than something else. And a good example, a beautiful example of that is moon glow. Our moon glow, we use, as it shows here, we use anthraconoid red, which is very light. We use ultramarine blue, a little bit heavier, and we use viridian, heavy. And we will mix all of those dry. Someone will ask me, John, if we use those 3, could we create moon glow? Because we sell each one of those as separate colors in tubes. Very close. Sure, very close. Not perfect, but very close. And I'll tell you what's the difference. So you can do it and be very close. We will mix those 3 pigments together dry, and then we will incorporate all those with gum arabic into one film. So we will have the moon glow made up of 3 different pigments that are different weights. They'll have differential gravity, and we get that beautiful granulation. When we were making this probably 25 years ago, instead of using the anthraconoid red, someone used pyrrole orange, and that made it shadow violet. That's how we came up with shadow violet. So the moon glow has a slight red to it, which is beautiful, and the shadow violet, same granulation, and has a slight orange tint to it. Both very beautiful. So the difference here is, if you took the 3 colors, anthraconoid red, ultramarine blue, viridian as tubes, and you mix them, you'd get very close. But then you're done, because those are all semi-transparent. So you'd be done. You go past that, you're going to start getting into mud. With the moon glow, because they were all put together in dry and made into essentially one color, you can still put 2 other colors. So that's the difference between the moon glow as you purchase it in the tube, or the moon glow that you might make yourself. Okay. So if we go to the next picture. So here you see on the most hardness scale, a 5 is an apatite, so green apatite, a blue apatite. We do have corundums or beryls, which are between the topaz and the corundums. So we have some very, very, very tough things. The Sedona probably lives within the 1.5 to 2.5. So that's why it can take less processing of a Sedona and way more processing of a green apatite or a blue apatite. If we look at particle size, just kind of give you an idea of particle size, and we look at that brown, that's the human hair. It's roughly 7 micrometers. It can be different. It could be a little bit larger. It could be a little bit smaller because we all vary, but essentially gives you roughly the size. And what we're looking for in terms of a Primatech is something smaller than the 40 microns to kind of compare the two sizes. And if we were looking at a French ultramarine, we're looking at something just less than 8 microns. So about the size or less than the size of a red blood cell. And if we look at an ultramarine, we're something that's going to be between 2 and 6 microns. So really, 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 really small. And again, I love having engineers in the group because I always ask, or anybody inquisitive, and artists are so inquisitive. It's one of the exciting things I find. And they'll say, well, how do you have something that can let the 8 microns go through, but hold back the 25 microns? How can you make something that small? It's almost impossible. You're talking 100th the size of a human hair. And so they are separating each other, not by any type of a machine. They're separated by chemistry by using different dispersion agents. Different dispersion agents allow different things to move differentially. And so it's could look that up. It's a fascinating process. The one thing I love about art, and I'm so sorry that for many schools, even here in the US, that it's starting or has left the school. When I was a young boy, art was there and music was there. The thing I love so much about art is it's all about art. It's about chemistry and it's about physics. You see color because of physics. You see the difference in how you get blossoms, for example, because of surface tension, or the difference of colors because of the chemistry. It makes chemistry and physics non-threatening. When you can have all three together, it just makes it exciting for children. It makes them want to learn. It makes them not afraid of chemistry and not afraid of physics, which I find so disheartening that we do that. Anyway, I'll get off that soapbox. If we look at the quinacridone, so quinacridone isn't that synthetic, and quinacridone means, or quin means 5. And as you can see here, you see 5 rings. In the molecule above it, you see 5 rings. It's a quinacridone. And where you see the O's and the N's, those are alpha and beta particles. The ring itself can't move. So the alpha and beta particles and where they're at determines the colors of a quinacridone. And this particular quinacridone and this molecule we're looking at is PV19. Again, P is always for pigment. So it's pigment violet, number 19. And so I explained size difference between PV29, French ultramarine, and ultramarine. And this is a good one to show you the difference that chemistry can do. So PV19 is kind of like, is your street, right? It's your street. So I'm going to Smith Street. And someone says, I can get to Smith Street, but I need to, if you're going to your house, it needs to be more specific. So then we say, okay, on Smith Street, it's number 19. Okay, so I get to number 19. But there's 4 address plaques on number 19. It's an apartment. There's multiple plaques on it. So PV19 is kind of getting you closer to the color, a step underneath this, which I don't put because most people wouldn't want to see it. Then you're going into lower levels and more specific parts of the chemistry of the color. So PV19, for example, if you saw it on a tube, it said, I want to go buy, like Daniel Smith, PV19, Quinn Violet, I'm going to go buy somebody else's. Is it going to be the same? It's not going to be the same because PV19 is just a general area. It's not the specific one that we're using. We're using a color one underneath that. So a way to understand that is PV19 is not only pigment violet, it is also Quinn rose, it is also Quinn red. All three are PV19. All three, exactly the same pigment, but a different underlying and chemistry to it. So not the same. Hope that made sense. So you can call it a shade, but it's not an artistic shade where we would add something to it, a dark, to give it a shade. It's the same word, but it has a different meaning in chemistry than it does in art. That's why I try not to use that because it confuses. But really what it is, it's a different shade. It's a different subset, if you will. Okay, we go to the next page. Oh my God, time goes by quick. And next page. Okay, I think what I'd like to do, it's going to be 11 o'clock. I'd like to take questions because I'm sure you guys have questions. Can we do that?
Absolutely, we can. Okay, I'm going to scroll back up in the chat and navigate the questions. So, do both ultramarine and French ultramarine granulate, even though they have very different maximum particle size? Do you QC on top size?
We do not. So multiple questions, nice. So yes, they both will granulate, slightly granulating. Yes, they both will do that. We will do drawdowns. For every color we make, every time we make it, we'll do a drawdown and we'll compare it against the last time we make it, just so we have continuity of color. So if it's the same chemistry in the pigment, we will see the same granulation within the pigment.
With pigment IDs like PB29 or PB28, what does the number actually indicate? So PB15 is greener and anything above PB29 is more violet, question mark?
No, there is a standard that's set by the Society of Textile, which is now it's worldwide, and a pigment manufacturer submits their pigment to them, and they decide where it's going to go. So they're making that determination, and so you can go to that society and read how they do it, etc. But there's a reason that so many colors are within, for example, siennas and umbers all reside in roughly the same area, and that's just because they're pushed there by the society.
Okay, so you talked on granulation. Somebody had asked what it is, but then you answered that question. But then they said also, tell me about perylene, so Peryline.
Okay, so paralenes and pyrroles, they're both quite beautiful. They're both synthetic. Pyrroles are paralenes and pyrroles are brighter than most all the other pigments and all the other colors. And pyrroles are more vibrant than the paralenes. They are both synthetic. If you want super vibrancy, then there's the pyrroles. If you want less, then there's the paralenes. Both synthetic, made usually by car industry or industry, made for car industry or industry.
Okay. Are the batch or lot numbers indicated on each of the paint tubes?
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful question. And thank you, because I forgot to say that. Yes, on the bottom of the tube, you will see the batch number. And we put a unique batch number on everything we make. So we've made quinacridone gold the last 37 years. Everyone has a different batch number, and the batch number tells us the day it was made, the pigment that was used, the batch maker, and the machine. So all that information is within that code. So the beautiful thing about that, and the reason that we put the batch number on our product, is our target customer has been and is the professional artist. And we're so glad that everybody uses it at every level. But for continuity, we've always made it for the professional, and that's our continuity. What it allows us to do is, if you're in your studio and you're having a question and you say, I have a question about quinacridone gold, we can answer it in general, because we've made a lot of quinacridone gold over the 3 decades, almost 4 decades. But if you give us the batch number, we keep 4 to 5 tubes of every batch we make. The chemist can walk upstairs, go to the flat file, pull out the flat file of quinacridone gold, go, and each one has a little tab of batch numbers. Go to that batch number, pull that tube out. Now he or she has the same tube that you have in your hands. And then it's just easier to answer a question. So
All
thank
right.
you for that question. Beautiful question. Thank you.
How is toxicity identified on the tube?
Toxicity is identified on the tube by being AP or CL. AP means approved, and then CL means caution label. When it has a caution label, there's different things that come into play when it has a caution label. We have a state that's 2 below us. That I love this state. If you're from California, love you to death. But California has their own requirements. And as I stated before, even though the rest of the world on a particular color might not require a CL label, I go by the most stringent. And if California requires it, I put it on. So that was not too long ago when it came to titanium. I still put it on. I don't need to put it on. But California was going to require it, so I put it on. It doesn't mean the rest of the world, because the rest of the world would not require it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Is light fastness tested against a standard reference material?
Light fastness is tested against the material that you're going to be using. So we do both. We will test the light fastness. So we get a palette of pigment in, even from, it's going to be the same manufacturer. We're going to get a palette in. We're going to test that, and we're going to get a reading. We're going to compare that against prior batches that we've made. And then we're going to, from there, we're going to also look at continuity of color. Continuity of color isn't the same thing as continuity of light fastness. We can test light fastness. We use a 1 to 10. Our ratio is 1 to 10. 1 part paint to 10 parts distilled water. And we do that under lab conditions. And that's how we test for light fastness.
All right. Those were all of the questions that were dropped down in the chat. I do have us going till 12:30, but if we're done, then we could call it now. Unless you just wanted to do the Q&A earlier.
No, if you got more questions, please shoot.
Yeah, if anyone has any more questions, just drop them in the chat and I can read them out. We'll give people a moment to ask the questions.
So, we not only have watercolor, but we have gouache. And watercolor is watercolor, and gouache is a water media. And that's because all of the gouache are opaque. So you can find a Cascade green watercolor, and you can find a Cascade green gouache. And they're not going to be the same. They're the same in the pigment that we use. We just use 3 or more times the amount of pigment to create the opacity. And people ask me all the time, well, wouldn't that make it more expensive? Absolutely. It makes it more expensive. But I still sell it for the same price because we're new to gouache, and I don't mind doing that. So I think it's a beautiful product. If you like the looks of an oil, but when you use a watercolor, it's not acrylic watercolor, it's a true watercolor made from pigment. So it's a water media. They're really beautiful, give you a different way to look at your artwork. We also have watercolor sticks. Watercolor sticks are less than a series 1 tube of paint. And we have series 1, 2, 3, and 4 in watercolor sticks. And they're easy to travel with. They're very beautiful to take paint off the top to paint with. They're a very interesting creative tool, if you will.
So we have some more questions.
Yeah, shoot.
So Penny said, this was fabulous. Does Daniel Smith have a book about pigments?
We do not have a book about pigments. That would be put on the CEO, who would be me, to probably put that together. That's a good idea. I like that. We do have a pamphlet on the Primitex that says where they're found, etc. I just did a presentation in Canada. You have a beautiful country. Beautiful country. I love it. And the people are just very warm. And we have some that come from Canada or right on the border between Canada and US, Alaska. And that would be the jadeite, for example. We both have beautiful jadeite and other materials that come from Canada.
The next one would be, could you talk about the iridescent and interference colors?
Absolutely. So we have colors that are called luminescent. And the luminescent are 4 families. And the families are pearlescent, duochrome, iridescent, interference. And they're, for the most part, all made from mica. There's only 2 that are made other than mica, and they're made with silica. And they're extremely complex, like a sandwich. Little particles that look like sandwiches, super complex. And that mica gives them that ability to refract. So they refract light. They have light go in all places. And that's what gives the luminescence that glittery. They're not glitter, but it gives it that effect that they shine. And if we look at the pearlescent, which you can add to almost any color, you get that. There's 2 pearlescent shimmer and pearlescent. And then if we look at the iridescent, the interesting thing about the iridescent, you can see them over white and you can see them over dark. And that's because they not only refract, they somewhat reflect, somewhat. And that's why you can see them over white or a light. You see them over yellow, for example. If we look at the interference refract. And you would see nothing over white. You might see them sparkle a little bit, but you'd see no color. But you would see them sparkle a lot more over the dark. And then we have duochrome, and duochrome are both piece of the iridescent and a piece of the interference together. So you get one color that can actually turn into 2 colors. And that's kind of the beauty of the interference. Some people will see my eye, can see light in my eye. All humans, probably animals too, but certainly humans, if you look at anybody's eyes, you can see light. And painting has a real preponderance of creating dead eye. When the painting dries, the eyes look dead. And you can add that sparkle by using different types of luminescent. Some people use it for skin or to add to the skin tone. Great for using on insects and fantasy and those and things of those nature as well.
All right. Frank says, double checking batch ID. I have a tube of phthalocyanine blue. Where do I look for the batch number?
It's a Daniel Smith tube.
Frank?
Yes, it is. So it'd be easy. It's going to
Yeah, a tube of Daniel Smith, extra fine watercolors.
Fantastic. Thank you for buying that. If you look on the bottom of the crimp, you'll see the number. You may have to take a little bit of flour.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it now.
And you'll
Yes.
see it. Sometimes it's, we kind of play with this thing. If we stamp it too hard, we will go through the aluminum. So we stamp it where you can see the number, but it may not be so easy to read it with your eye. But if you put a little bit of powder on it, it's really easy to read.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for asking that.
And then the next one would be, what is the color range for gouache?
Oh my gosh. We have 72, so we have all different types of colors. What we did is we talked to the brand ambassadors and we brought out those which we thought were going to be the best, create the best palette to start with. We'll probably add on to it, but there's 72 colors and they're on back of the color chart. And the color chart is also online. There's an interactive color chart online that you can flip. And you can also see the gouache colors online. And I don't know if, yeah, and in the 266, now it's 272 dot card, they're also included as part of that. Not all of them, but like 24 of them.
And then the next one is, how is white gouache product or produced?
So all the colors are produced, the gouache are pretty much produced the same way. How we get opacity, some people get it through doing an acrylic. We don't do that. Some by doing a calcium carbonate, which makes it less expensive. We don't do that. We just add more color. So if you look at the pigment white, so titanium white is PW6, shade 1. So, or PW6 shade 1 is buff titanium, PW6 is titanium white. We will just use about 3 times the pigment load to create the opacity. Can we buy paper color charts?
Color charts, yep.
Yeah, the answer to that one is yes, you can. So retailers can have the color charts. We sell them as dot cards, and they're actually an excellent way to test all the colors instead of you trying to guess which color you might like. Our dot cards, people say, John, why do you make so many yellows? And that's because there's different yellows in terms of which ones might stain, which ones have different opacity, which ones might granulate. If I am doing a Ferrari, I probably don't want it to granulate. So I'd look for a yellow that was non-granulating. If I wanted to do multiple glazings, I'd probably pick a yellow that was more transparent. So all that information is on the color chart, and you're able to read it to pick out the yellow you want to use that gets the result that you want. So yes, they are. They're available. They're available at the store.
All right. Would you, oh, they said thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, Pat.
Do you have any other interesting little tidbits for the last little bit of
Oh
our
my God,
Zoom?
thousands of them.
Yeah, I figured.
Sometimes the longest presentation I had was in Dubai, and it was 6 hours.
Mhm.
And it was full of chemists and physicists who loved art. I will tell you, they love art. And plus I love speaking to artists. I mean, you're my group. So Cascade Green, people ask about Cascade Green. Cascade Green is a co-precipitated color, which means it's 2 pigments that are locked together. And the cool thing about Cascade Green is when you add water to it, you break that coupling. And that's why if you wait over time, so it looks like leprechauns have visited your artwork, because you see some blues and some yellow and some green. And where'd that come from? And that's those 2 co-precipitated pigments coming apart. Lunar Black. Lunar Black is a marvelous color, very interesting color. It's a magnetic color. You can put the magnet underneath and move the lunar black around your painting, as long as it's still wet in solution. Lunar Black is a single pigment that granulates, that kind of breaks the rule of granulation. And that's because it's a nanoparticle. It's unbelievable how small it is. And it moves away from itself. So if you put yellow, hands of yellow, for example, the lunar black will move away from the yellow. If you used lamp black, you're going to cover the yellow. So that's a very unique quality. The cadmiums, I have cadmium U's. I started that about 14 years ago. The U, when it comes to chemistry, means not what's before it. So it's saying it's not a cadmium. And that's because I use co-precipitated colors to create the same intensity, the same opacity, but I use high performance pigments to do that. And that's because I moved away from cadmiums. The way I look at the world in my business, again, everybody's important to me. Customer keeps me in business, and my employees keep me in business, and they're my employees. It's absolutely my responsibility to make sure they're safe. And that's why I don't just have toxicology, I have double companies that do toxicology. And so long as I'm making sure my people are safe, I'm making sure you're safe. And that's important to me. I didn't buy an art company. The thing I love about my company as an art company is through your abilities, I see the beauty that it can create. I like being associated with something that creates beauty. I could have bought a lot of other businesses. I love this business. People ask me when I'm going to retire. I find this business unbelievably energizing. I'm blessed to be able to travel 9 months out of the year and meet with artists. Last year, I met with probably 20,000 artists. This year, probably less because I tried to take 3 months off, but at least in the tens of thousands. And I find it energizing. I find it absolutely wonderful. Anybody that gives presentations or meets with other people and gets bombarded with questions, I think you grow. And I love when I get stumped because then I get to grow. And I always tell you the answer when I get stumped. So thank you.
I was thinking maybe you could touch on some of your watercolor grounds and things like that. I could share
Oh,
my
sure.
screen again for
Yeah,
the photo so people have the
yeah,
visual. That's
yeah,
something that we get a lot of questions about in general.
absolutely. So we make a frisket, which is a masking fluid. And masking fluid can be used for in any way. It's really a barrier. And I've seen artists. Oh, I'd certainly invite all of you, please, to come to the Thursday or Friday live session. Friday we have a master artist from somewhere in the world that gives you insights of how they paint. And on Thursday it's open session. You can ask questions and get answers. Love to see you there. So please, by all means. You can find it on the Daniel Smith site, and it's free to come in. So love to see you there. The watercolor ground, we make it in several different colors, and it's really liquid watercolor paper in a bottle. You can put it on plastic, metal, wood. You wait 24 hours, and now you have a paintable surface. And the watercolor would adhere to it just like does watercolor paper. The interesting thing is, if you take any of the titanium white, you can add up to 10% of Daniel Smith watercolor to it to tint it. You can't do that over and over. So if you tint it with 10%, you can't come back 3 days later, give another 10%. It's whatever amount you've used, so use a teaspoon of it, and you tint it, that's it. Okay, so you can do another teaspoon of fresh titanium white, but once you've tinted, that's it. And you do that with about 10%. You could do up to 15% if you use an acrylic. So in acrylic paint, you could do up to 15% to give it color. You wait 24 hours for best results and start out with, I always tell people start off with a light layer and then do as many layers as you deem necessary. But it's a way to be creative. You can do it on stones and wood, and it's just all types of just left to your creativity.
All right. I guess last question. How
Yeah.
did the name Daniel Smith get chosen?
It was a very complicated process. No, it was a very easy process. Daniel Smith was the founder. Daniel Smith came from Michigan and ended up in Seattle and was worked in the printmaking department. He worked for a company that sold to the printmaking department of Seattle, Washington. And Seattle, Washington had Washington University, had this great program, which is if you could make something that was as good a product they were buying from somewhere else, they would buy it from you. They really wanted to help entrepreneurs. And so Dan looked at, he was making this ink for years and said, I can do this. Bought a 3-roll mill, actually did it, made enough money that he was able to quit his job, bought a little tiny building, made ink, did okay. And then like most things, you're never a prophet in your own land, it goes. And an artist in New York was saying, oh, I use this ink from this little company called Daniel Smith. And pretty soon Dan was hearing these knocking on his little building. Can I buy this directly from you? And he had no stores. So I said, yeah, sure, you can do that. And so he started selling. He opened up for a couple of hours and sell. And then he realized there was more people that needed printmaking paper than the ink itself. So he started selling paper and ink and everything. And so it comes from the man, Daniel Smith, who then, when I hired Dan, was still at the company. I became Dan's retirement plan. And so I bought the company about 15 years ago. I was CEO when I was 33, and I had 20% of the company, but I bought everything about 15, 17 years ago. And he's a wonderful man, super creative. I see him, talk to him multiple times a year and see him twice a year in South Dakota. Just a wonderful guy. So it's named after the founder, Daniel Smith.